Look at me in my face, right? During my trial, look at me in my face telling me, yo, don't worry about it, bro. I got you. And I never see him again.
It was supposed to be just another quiet industry night, a private celebration for a hip-hop icon whose influence runs deep in every corner of the culture. But behind the smiles and champagne, something about that night felt different. Because for the first time in years, the people closest to Jay-Z weren't standing beside him. They were across the room, watching, whispering. They say loyalty in the music business is a currency, and when that currency runs out, the truth comes due. People started noticing small things, certain looks not exchanged, handshakes missed, energy off. To most, it was nothing. But to those who know Jay, it meant something was brewing. And when one of his oldest friends spoke out after that night, everything people thought they knew about Roc Nation's inner circle started to crack.
Any issues he ever had, I handled that. From Reasonable Doubt, when he sit here and tell you, my man got his side sprayed up on Uptown Block, that's me. That's me with this scar from here up here. So he never had no street issues. Rob him, I'm going to see them. You understand? When I go see them got me on the floor with the guns, surrounded with the guns to my head. Behind him. Only thing saved my life is me really knowing these things. They spared my life.
That clip hit different because it wasn't from a random artist venting on live. It came from someone who'd been with Jay-Z since before the fame, before the business meetings, before the billionaire brand. That voice belonged to Emory Jones, the man Hav once called family. When Jay rose to superstardom, Emory was right there until one move changed everything. A drug trafficking case sent Emory behind bars for nearly a decade. And while most people would have vanished after that, Jay didn't. At least that's what the story used to be. He mentioned Emory in songs, kept his name alive in interviews, even helped rebuild his life after prison. But now, years later, the same man who once thanked Jay publicly was calling him out for abandoning him when it mattered most. So the question became, what changed? Was this a real fracture between brothers, or just the fallout of a promise that never got kept?
2020, y'all. And it's different than when it was 2016. You know, the game has been elevated. As we can tell, there's no expense being spared. We had a black billionaire.
It's the pattern that nobody wants to admit. The closer you are to Jay-Z, the more likely you are to end up on the outside looking in. And that's not coming from tabloids. It's coming from the very people who helped make him who he is. Dame Dash once called him a brother. Together they built Rockefeller, not just a label, but an empire. But when the money and power shifted, the friendship didn't survive. Years later, we're seeing the same energy. But now from Emory, a man Jay once risked his image to protect. That's when fans started asking questions Jay never answers publicly. Why do his closest friends always end up turned against him? Why does loyalty seem to stop when success starts? Behind the polished business deals and champagne celebrations, there's a darker side to Jay's world, one that no camera crew ever captures. And if you listen closely, you'll realize this isn't about fame or money anymore. It's about something deeper: respect, power, and the cost of staying at the top.
Who is Emory Jones? Who is Emory Jones?
Humble soul, that's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Just a humble soul that just happened to have a great best friend and brother named Jay-Z as a part of the story.
That line aged like prophecy, because the same blueprint that made Jay-Z untouchable in business might be the same one that cost him his real connections. Back in the early 2000s, Rockefeller wasn't just a label, it was a movement. Everybody ate together, everybody had a role. Jay was the face, Dame was the fire, Biggs was the structure. It worked, until power started dividing them. When the split came, Jay walked away with the brand, and the relationships, they cracked quietly, one by one. Now fast forward 20 years, and it feels like that same story is repeating itself, just with new characters and bigger stakes. The internet's calling it karma, but inside the industry people are whispering something colder, that maybe Jay-Z's biggest enemy was never outside his circle. It was the silence inside it. And when Emory finally broke that silence, what he revealed wasn't just pain, it was history repeating itself.
It was like, I went from, yeah, like shock. I was just couldn't believe it. Like I just got finished talking to this man on the phone. Like it wasn't even, he's in the club, like having the time of his life, It was just like that. Yeah, it just couldn't happen.
That's not just disappointment. That's a wound that never healed. Because when loyalty is tested, it's not tested when everything's good. It's tested when everything falls apart. And for Emery, that moment came when his freedom was on the line. Jay had built a reputation on loyalty, from raps about street code to real-life actions that made fans believe he always held his people down. But this story challenged that myth in real time, because Emery wasn't just another associate. He was part of Jay's identity, his street credibility, his legacy. So when Emery said, "I didn't see him," not once, that line hit like a punch, not because of what it said, but because of who said it. This was the same man Jay shouted out in songs, the one he brought into Roc Nation after prison. So people started wondering, was this really betrayal, or just a moment where fame and loyalty couldn't coexist anymore? Because if even Emery felt left behind, who's left that still trusts Jay fully?
My Uncle Buzz, like he had this police look with him, right? So he was easier to move up and down the highway. You know what I'm saying? Police, we'd be in a whole nother car, but the police would look at my uncle and be like, "Man, this nigga like the police." So he'd keep going. He just had a police look.
That single line summed up what decades of music couldn't, the reality behind every superstar's circle. And for Jay-Z, it's a pattern that's now too loud to ignore. At one point, it felt like Jay could do no wrong. Every deal turned to gold. Every song became scripture. But power changes people. And even the most loyal ones start to wonder where they fit when the empire gets too big for the original crew. The silence from Jay's camp after Emery's words spoke volumes. No denial, no statement, just quiet. And that's what made fans start speculating even more. Maybe the distance wasn't accidental. Maybe it was intentional. If you look closely, Jay's story has always had one constant. Everyone around him eventually leaves. Some quietly, some publicly, but always after the same moment, when loyalty and legacy collide. And that's what makes this story hit harder than any diss track. It's not about who's right or wrong. It's about what happens when trust turns into a transaction. When loyalty starts cracking at the top, the echoes hit every level beneath it. People who once looked at Jay as a blueprint began looking at him differently, not as the mentor who showed them how to build empires, but as the man who reminded them that empires don't make space for everyone. Behind the scenes, the whispers spread like wildfire. The same people who once wore the Roc diamond proudly were now second-guessing their place in the story, and you could feel it in the tone of interviews, in the body language during events, in the way eyes no longer met when cameras turned off. Some called it evolution, others called it betrayal, but whichever side you looked from, one thing was clear. Jay's inner circle wasn't what it used to be. Because here's the thing about success. It isolates. It forces you to make choices between your peace and your people. And for Jay-Z, those choices were starting to show publicly in a way they never had before. When Emery spoke, it wasn't just frustration, it was exhaustion. The kind that comes after years of silence, after seeing the image of loyalty painted larger than the reality behind it. Because deep down, he wasn't just talking about one man, he was talking about the entire machine, the way fame rewrites friendships and power reorders priorities, and it hit fans differently. Not because they were shocked, but because they'd seen this movie before. Dame, Beanie, Kanye, now Emery. It was the same pattern, just a different decade. The internet caught on fast, dissecting every lyric, every public appearance, every subtle move like it was evidence in an ongoing case. Old interviews resurfaced, cryptic tweets got reinterpreted, and within hours, Jay-Z loyalty was trending like a court of public opinion had just reopened the files on his entire career. But it wasn't just gossip, it was reflection. Fans began asking a more uncomfortable question. Can loyalty really exist in a world built on power moves? Because if Jay-Z, the man who preached integrity and brotherhood through his lyrics, couldn't maintain that energy off mic, then what chance does anyone else in that game have? Inside the culture, that question burned deeper. Hip-hop has always glorified codes, loyalty, respect, family. But now it was starting to look like those codes were just slogans, designed to sound powerful until tested in real life. The silence from Jay became its own kind of response. And if you know him, that's not surprising. Jay doesn't move impulsively. He lets time do the talking. But in this era, silence doesn't calm speculation, it feeds it. So every day he stayed quiet, more people started believing that maybe Emery wasn't just hurt, maybe he was right. The energy shifted online. Some fans defended Jay, saying Emery should have handled it privately. Others said this was karma, the natural result of decades of unchecked ego disguised as strategy. Either way, it became clear that what once looked like unbreakable loyalty was now on full display as a public fracture. But here's the irony. The same man whose success inspired his circle also created the very distance they now resent. Because when you're that high up, you stop living in the same world as the people who helped you climb. The dinners change, the calls slow down, and before you even realize it, you've built an empire with no familiar faces left in the room. Jay has always played chess, not checkers, but this time, his moves might have cost him more than just another partnership. They might have cost him the people who actually understood him. And that's what gives this story its real weight. Not the drama, but the humanity. Because beneath the business suits and billionaire headlines, there's still the Brooklyn kid who used to ride through Marcy with people who believed in him before the world did. And now those same people are wondering if the man they believed in still remembers where he came from. The most powerful part? Jay doesn't have to say a word. His entire history speaks for him. Every deal, every friendship, every silence, each one is part of a long, complicated story about what it costs to keep winning. And maybe that's the real message in all this. Because when you strip away the headlines, the interviews, and the conspiracies, you're left with a truth no one wants to admit. Every empire is built on sacrifice. The question is just who gets sacrificed along the way. For Emery, it might have been brotherhood. For Jay, maybe it's peace of mind. Either way, both of them lost something. The industry's watching closely now, because every time Jay steps out, people aren't just asking about the next business move. They're watching who's standing beside him, and lately that space beside him keeps getting wider. But maybe that's the price of being who he is, a man too powerful to be questioned, too calculated to be understood. Because for all his success, one thing about Jay-Z remains unchanged. He never moves without a reason. And if people are turning against him now, maybe that's part of the plan too. Still, the tension lingers. Fans want answers, his circle wants closure, and the internet, well, it just wants more drama. But underneath all of it lies a simple truth. You can build empires with friends, or you can build legacies alone. You rarely get both. And as Jay continues to move in silence, the world will keep watching, waiting for that next crack, that next quote, that next moment where the mask slips, and we see who's really behind the brand. Because if this chapter has taught us anything, it's that success doesn't erase history, it just buries it deeper. And sometimes the people who know your past are the same ones who can destroy your peace. So maybe Jay isn't avoiding his old allies out of pride. Maybe it's survival. Because when you've built something that big, even loyalty can become a liability. Still, the silence can't last forever. And when Jay finally decides to address the whispers, if he ever does, it won't be with anger. It'll be with strategy. Because that's the thing about Hav. He doesn't react. He repositions. And when he does, everyone watching will realize this wasn't just about loyalty, it was about control. And in that world, control is everything. So the only real question left now is, who's next? Who's going to speak out? And who's going to stay quiet to keep their seat at the table? Because the one thing Jay-Z has proven time and time again, you can leave the table, but the game keeps playing without you. And as the dust settles, one truth remains clear. Everybody wants to eat, but not everybody wants to pay the price of the feast. So ask yourself, when the lights go out and the crowd disappears, who's still standing next to you? Because loyalty sounds good in a verse, but it looks different in real life. And don't go anywhere. Click the next video you see on your screen for even more juicy celebrity chaos, betrayals, and stories Hollywood doesn't want you to know. See you in the next one.